I will now officially do this, the whole what you've already heard. But welcome everyone. My name is Rita Azevedo. I work for Ligature as a program manager for data infrastructure, and I have been working for data infrastructure projects, I think, since around 2013, in projects like TRADE, BBMRI, and now HealthRI. Maybe you've heard of those before. And since the beginning of the COVID pandemic, I've been involved in a variety of data infrastructure projects from HealthRI part, and this one is, I think, the one that is going to, I think, lead to a really interesting portal and set of data from all of us. So I'm really happy to have you here today, and so that we can share our plans with you and how we are going to collaborate together. I'm going to quickly share my screen. I think I can do it. Sorry, it always wait a second. There we go. Can you see my slides? Yes. So as I said before, please use our joint agenda and common minutes for this discussion. And we're going to be doing today the meeting with Mijke, Margreet, Jeroen, Erik, and myself. And I'll first pass the word to Mijke, who's going to kick off the discussion with all of us, I hope.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, I forgot to say something very important. This session is being recorded. So if you have any objections, just let us know.
Great, thank you, Rita. So hi, my name is Mijke Jetten. I'm a community manager for data stewardship at HealthRI and DTL, Dutch Tech Center for Life Sciences. And I'm here to help the project and ZonMw and you guys with getting you together as a community of data stewards and data stewards helping your researchers, who we have also on board today, so that's really nice. So if you look at the minutes, you can see in the table where we ask you to include your information that there is a reference to a data steward mailing list and a data steward Slack community. These are existing mailing lists and community by an already existing data steward interest group by DTL and HealthRI. So some of you might be already on the list, but if you're not yet on the list, please add yes to the mailing list and the Slack question, so we can keep you updated about everything going on in COVID-19. Don't worry too much if you're not on the mailing list or not on the Slack. We will inform you anyway, so you don't have to say yes if you don't feel comfortable about it. But I think it's a really nice existing data stewards community from which you can learn a lot. So we'll keep you posted anyway. But we do use, well, we notice that it's in some cases quite handy to have easy, quick conversations like using Slack, but you can also email, call us, and we'll help you solve issues. And as Rita will come back to later on, we have lots of additional workshops to help you out on questions and issues you have. So the first part of this session is about having, well, we ideally wanted to do a broader introduction, but we have too big a group to introduce everyone. So we figured it would be nice if you write down those issues or those good practices or the questions you have or that you experienced already in the COVID-19 research. So I can ask you to introduce yourself and shout out to the group about, well, sharing those issues, questions, insights already. So maybe I'll give the floor to Adriana, who already posed a question. So could you explain a little bit about the question, and then we make sure we answer it in the meeting.
Yes, good morning. My name is Adriana Tami. I'm working at the University Medical Center in Groningen. And because one of my team already attended the session 2 days ago, I think. And so she informed me that
Dankjewel.
Initially, we understood that the next sessions will be actually workshops to help us build the data management plan. But I think she understood that that is not so. That is some type of discussion. So I think I have to wait to see what you say today. But what we really expected is to of course have support from you in how to build this data management plan. Because okay, we work with data, but it doesn't mean we have the experience or the knowledge in building this data management plan, especially if we don't still know what you mean by that. Yeah, so I read what the ZonMw says, but it's still a bit of a question what exactly you need and what we should do on top of all what we need to do. Yes. That's my fear, that actually we have so much to do with these projects and COVID emergency that if it's too complex or too much work, yeah, I think you should be aware of this. So how much you ask from us.
Yes, thank you, Adriana. It's really nice that you're pointing, shouting out to us, saying that it is indeed a lot that we're asking of you, but these information sessions and workshops are also there to help you out with solving those issues. So if you have similar issues, questions, concerns, or answers, practices, please write them down in the minute section. And I think we could, because we have some time left and there are no other questions, no other practices, we could maybe give Margreet already a bit of the floor on answering this question.
Just a last point, is it possible to get also like personal advice? So we can contact you personally to get advice if we have questions, or we can, you know, ask you to read what we're doing or look at the structure. I don't know. That will help us.
Should I say something about it?
Yeah.
As I will point out in my introduction in a few minutes, actually we followed a regular procedure for data management in ZonMw projects. And now we have something special to create community-specific metadata. The way we will do that will be introduced with these workshops and training, and Erik and Jeroen will tell everything about it. But the regular procedure for data management still counts. And maybe for you it's the first time that you are doing a ZonMw project and that you have to do data management and comply with these procedures. And then it would be better to have a separate meeting besides this workshop. But this way of working of ZonMw already is in place for a couple of years. So it's not new to most of the researchers. And I know in Groningen, there's a very good research support office. So you can get support from there as well.
Thank you, Margreet, for already explaining this to us. And I think while shouting out to you back, Adriana, so we'll do everything to help you solve the issues that you have. So I think the workshops will answer some questions already. And I think it's a very good advice, generic advice from Margreet, to make sure to contact your RDM support or your data steward to have him or her helping out with those issues that you run into. So are there any other people who have, I don't know, a good practice, who want to share their experience? Did you already start doing your research, or did you already start helping your researcher with, for instance, a data management plan or talking about the data? Or are we all waiting for this kickstart and then, well, we get going? Or is there someone who wants to share a bit of experience saying, well, this is what we're currently helping the researcher already with, or as a researcher, this is what we got help from.
Inge is wanting to ask a question.
Yeah, so my name is Inge Slauerhoff. I work at Radboud University, and I am the data steward of one of the projects there. And last, I think, Tuesday, we kicked off the research, and already we discussed, like, for example, where are we going to store our data? What kind of data storage solution will we agree on to use? What kind of folder structure is handy? What tools are we going to use? So in a really, well, early stage, we're still on, but we are already, my advice is asked about where to store data and how. Maybe just simple questions like folder structure and how are we going to keep this organized within the research. So not writing a data management plan yet, but still starting on data management in practice, yes.
Yeah, really nice, Inge. And did you manage to do that did the researchers contact you, or did you take the initiative, or?
No, the researchers contacted me, so they are very, yes, active in research data management, and they really want my help and my expertise on these kind of issues. Also, we discussed ethical issues and that we should have an appointment. So I'm there to advise, but they really want my advice. So that's really nice to have such a group of people who really want to work and also see data management as something that can help them during the research and is not only a burden and only an administrative task. So that's a really nice group of people, yes.
Yes, thank you, Inge. Please make sure to add that to the notes as well, so people could use your experience to share, reuse, etc. Fabiola, you had a question, so could you explain your question?
Yes, thank you. Indeed, I just added my question to the Google document. I read in one of the ZonMw emails, I believe, about the CRF WHO form, and I was just wondering what does it entail, and does it apply to all the projects, and how to use it, and will we learn something about it in these workshops?
I think it may be a question for Jeroen to answer, but I think for those who have clinical data, it is important to already start working from the COVID standards that there is, so that we don't have to do a lot of work to integrate data from each other's project if needed. So that's what the WHO ECRF is a standard CRF form that should be applied in every clinical COVID project. And Jeroen and I and some others already also in the call here, like Olaf, have been working very hard to combine the data that has been collected already in all the UMCs, so that in the future there's no changes, no spreading of the data in different directions. So we would like from you guys who use clinical data to start already from the good point. So if you have clinical data to be collected, please contact us so that we can give you the tips on how to go forward. I think that's the message. So me, Jeroen, get in contact with us.
So that's the basic starting point. And the other starting point is please contact the research data management offices in your hospital. So Fabiola, of course, the research data management is either Rudy or Wim at our hospital. So I'm involved with them as well. But it holds for all, let's say, hospitals. So please contact, so also the data stewardship community led by Mijke could point to that. So at least don't be shy, so to say. So if you have questions, please ask them. And by the way, ECRF stands for electronic case record form. So for those who are not familiar with those kind of terms, it's a kind of electronic version of a paper form where you have the questions: is this patient positive or negative? So those kind of basic informations. Even if you don't collect the data but would like to use that data, please contact your local offices or Rita and myself.
Yep.
Yeah.
So please don't reinvent wheels. And that will be one of the take-home messages from one of the slides.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we have a question from Anita.
Yeah, Anita, can you pose your question yourself?
Yes, my question, so I'm data steward at the law faculty in Nijmegen, and I'm involved as data steward in one of the COVID projects. And my question was, I suppose that we have to use the ZonMw template for writing our data management plan. And on the website of ZonMw, I found a reference to a website, DMP Online, where this template can be found and filled in. And would you recommend us to use this website? I'm asking also because we are working together with 2 other universities, and so I'm looking for a DMP tool which allows sharing the plan and adding making additions and comments by so that all the partners can use it.
Margreet, can you maybe reply to that? Yeah.
Yes. This is also a question about the regular procedure for fair data management at ZonMw, and there's also a link to the DMP templates that are already acknowledged at the several universities, UMC's, and Universities of Applied Science. You can look at that list. I think the University of Nijmegen is also acknowledged. But I suggest to also, like with Adriana, to have a separate phone call to discuss this more in detail, because it's about the regular procedure, and today we have time reserved for the special attention points for the COVID program.
Okay.
Yeah, but make sure to shout out to Inge, because Inge can also help you out at Radboud University, but you know each other very well, so that will be all right. So I think the questions are dropping in now. So I propose that we move, I'll give the chairing role back to Rita, but we'll make sure that we come back to the questions. So keep adding questions and make sure you add those questions also during the presentations. And in the end, we'll make sure that we got all your questions answered, or come back to you to answer your question later on.
Thank you, Mijke. I'm just going to share again my screen just for a couple of minutes before I give the word to Margreet. So can you see my screen again? So the idea of this sessions that we're organizing is really to guide you in the steps that that we together in a collaboration mode will have to take to get to better COVID fair data services and a portal. And we, together with Go Fair, so ZonMw, Health RI, DTL, Go Fair. And the first ones are, this is the third of 3 sessions informing you about the setup, about the project, and how you can collaborate with us, or you should collaborate with us. There's still 2 different types of workshops planned ahead. We'll go in more detail about those later, and also we are going to have some real community Q&A sessions every week, where you can always ask us questions on that time period every week, but we'll also come back to that. But so this just for you already have an idea that we have what sort of workshops we are organizing. And this one, I do hope that after today's session, you'll understand what is the goal of this special COVID fair data services, what's on top of the ZonMw data requirements that are already there, what ZonMw is expecting from us all, and how you will be collaborating with us to deliver your metadata specific to your type of domain, and how we can make that data available through a central find and request portal. So that's the kind of thing that we're going to be discussing today. And to start, I'm going to give the word to Margreet, who has been from ZonMw, who we all know has been really an ambassador and within ZonMw, and I think in the Netherlands, to make sure that data management is taken seriously and put on the map So thank you very much, Margreet, for this humongous task that you've been undertaking, and I'm very happy to give you the word now. Margreet, you're on mute.
Yeah, unmute. Okay, I just want to check, can you see my sheets properly without presentation notes and all kinds of disturbing things around? Yeah, okay. So thank you, Rita and Mijke, Jeroen and Erik for this collaboration. And this is actually an introduction to the introduction of the FAIR data services that we are organizing as a special project along with the COVID research projects. And here I will show what we mean with that. I will show you about the FAIR data, the role of the data stewards and the researchers, and that's the urgency of Corona, why we are taking these special steps now with the COVID program, and what does it mean for your research data management and data stewardship activities for ZonMw. First of all, I mentioned this metaphor. It is the metaphor of a car engine. It's actually the material that makes your car running. And that is how we look at the data, but also your biological samples, images, recordings of interviews, etc., etc. That's all the material that you do your research with. And ZonMw is, of course, very interested in your research results and that they are published properly. But we're also interested in this material, that is maintained properly, that it can be reused in new research, that it can be linked with material from other projects to get new insights, etc., etc. And that is why we set requirements for data management and data stewardship. But we recognize that more and more, this is a very special professional exercise for which data stewards are becoming more and more the central experts. And we already discussed a few questions from researchers who are concerned, am I going to put all my time in this instead of my real research? Well, of course, that is not what we want, but we do want to create awareness for this. And that's why we are organizing all this support and community building. This picture shows an advanced expertise, more advanced technology. And that's actually also the stage that we are in now for FAIR data management. And Erik and Jeroen will explain much more about that in a minute. So this all started with Corona. Well, actually it started already a few years ago, our attention for open science and FAIR data. But early this year, when the Corona pandemic showed its urgency and seriousness for society, we immediately recognized that open science and FAIR data are important contributors to solving this pandemic. And in March, we commissioned the FAIR Foundation to perform the project for Virus Outbreak Data Network, VODAN. And the news items you can see on this sheet, they contain all the information about that. So I invite you to read those when you have time. You can find them on our website. And taking all these efforts is to help us to prevent what is on this sheet. And we think that the lack of findable data, the lack of overview on all these publications causes serious delay in research, and therefore for soon solutions for the pandemic. So the Virus Outbreak Network is established now. It has very interesting results and established some very interesting ways of working, infrastructure. And based on this experience, we developed the projects for FAIR data services that we are talking about now. We did that together again with the Go FAIR Foundation and with DTL and Health-RI. Well, those are actually the one organization now. And those are the people who host these webinars you are in now. The project for FAIR data services, as I said, goes along with the research projects in the COVID program. And what are we going to do now? Again, on the right, you see a news item that introduces this all. But what are we going to do now? Above FAIR data management, or actually as an integral part of FAIR data management, we're going to spend some special attention to the metadata, the data about the data. The reasoning is that if we do that, we make community-specific choices. We agree with one another about what are we going to put in our metadata scheme. What is the standardized way to describe the data, the research that we are performing? Then we contribute enormously to the reusability of our data. It helps us to compare data, etc. But the COVID program is a very wide program. It includes clinical research, fundamental research, but also, like we just heard, research into legal issues. So it's a broad range from biomedical to social sciences, social economical disciplines. So we will see, and Erik of course will explain that more precisely, we will develop these metadata according to the subdisciplines that are in the COVID program. Jeroen will tell us more about the National Data Portal, in which we can expose our metadata and in which we can find and reuse these metadata. And Mijke just told us about the support and community building to help you out with all these new developments. Taking this all together, actually, we are all together in one big experiment, one big project of co-development. And along with this code development, we will implement our new metadata and procedures in our projects. And the data stewards and the researchers both take an important role in this. The data stewards for their expertise on data, the researchers for their expertise on COVID and the research topics. And of course, as you have noticed, we are organizing webinars, checklists, trainings, etc. So what is so special about data stewardship in the research program? I already told you that it is actually business as usual. You already had to do data management for your project since a few years for ZonMw. But we're doing something special to make these community-specific choices and to develop a community-specific metadata scheme and to put some more effort in organizing support and community building. Again, here, the researcher and the data stewards closely work together on this for domain expertise and data expertise. This all already started in the phase of the grant proposal. Many of you already participated in the webinars we organized in this spring when you had to prepare your research grant proposal. And in the requirements we set, we distinguish the green lines, which are primarily focused on FAIR data, and the blue lines, which are primarily focused on transparency, which is in the other open science topics. Together, they represent open science and FAIR data requirements. The top half is already included in the preparation phase of your project. The lower half is now what we're doing now in the early projects, in the performance phase. Again, the requirements here on the left side, the requirements in the grant proposal phase, and in the darker lines, the phase that we are in now. In the preparation phase, you had to fill in a checklist with your grant proposal. And the checklist already asked you, who is your data steward? Do you already know COVID-specific standards or technologies or infrastructure that you can use? Because as you have noticed, we want to drive you to community-specific choices. And we also ask you to budget for data management in your projects. And now we are in the phase of preparing your data management plan, which is business as usual, but also you are asked to make community-specific choices. And that is what we are going to do in this fall in these webinars. And that is also why we set the deadline for your data management after all the webinars and training. And that is, and earlier I said the 1st of December, but we yesterday decided with our colleagues to set the deadline on January 15. So that gives you time to prepare your data management, come to us with the questions about that, and include all the community-specific choices that we will make here with the webinars and the training. So actually that is what I already explained, number 2 and 3. The training of the data stewards and the co-development to make community-specific choices. And that is what it looks like in the picture. I already showed you the researcher and the data steward who work together. And now on the on the right side of the sheet, I show you the organizations that are going to help you with this and provide the specific expertise. And there you can find the FAIR data services and research infrastructures like GoFair, DTL, Health-RI, but also for the social sciences, we will collaborate with people from Odyssey. And there are the data stewardship competence centers that are now being developed at the universities and UMC's, and Mijke knows much more about that. This is my last sheet to summarize. What do you need to do? You need to follow the ZonMw procedure as usual for your FAIR data management. You have to write a DMP together with your data stewards. You have to fill in the key items, which are the 7 items that are actually a summary of your DMP, listing the most important items of your data management. These key items, we explain it all on the website, which is here on the right side. These key items you build up during your projects. You maybe know some already, but at the end of the project, you will know them all. And when planning this, you should make community-specific choices, in this case, tailored to the COVID research. And you can make use of the metadata scheme that will be developed together with you in the workshops and the training. And Erik will explain that now, or after Jeroen's explanation of the National Data Portal. That is my talk. Maybe there are some questions if there's still time, but I do not want to take too much time from Jeroen and Erik. So beware that there's enough time to answer your questions also in the Google Doc and later after this webinar.
I think we're very much on time. So if people do have questions for Margreet already, please, we have a little bit of time to go specifically into that. I don't see anyone, no one has written any question yet in the notes.
I have, if it's okay, I have one question. I'm from the UMC Utrecht, And one of the challenges that we are facing is that we collected a lot of samples and clinical data from COVID patients, but during the first wave, it was so hectic and it was there was so much stress that the collection of also clinical data is not really standardized as we usually do for cohorts. So in retrospect, it's very difficult to get all the data that you would have loved to have. So that is, I think one of the, so in the second wave, of course, this will be easier probably, but the first wave that can be really a problem to have standardized data and metadata.
Yes, it's we understand it very well. We have talked about it with some people already, but maybe we should try to find a solution with Jeroen and Erik for that. Then maybe we should have a separate discussion. What are the most important data that we want to put some extra effort in preserving anyway and verifying afterwards? But that's we understand the situation. Maybe Erik or Jeroen want to say something about this already.
I should unmute, sorry. It was already indicated in an earlier question and also pointed out by Rita, is that currently, also in hindsight, we are now trying to harmonize all the data collected, especially based on the WHO information schema, so that at least that data can be combined and reused. And that means that all data to be collected, so to say, we strongly advise the hospitals, not only the university medical centers, but also the hospitals, like the Stichting Topzorgziekenhuizen, for example, to collect the data according to that standardized form. At least the mapping is available or will be available, so that will help you. So you don't have to reinvent wheels. So if you stick to that scheme already used in the local hospital, then you are safe for the moment. But we do know and we do realize that not all data is even known to each other. It might be that even a colleague at my own department, one floor up, has its own database, so to say. So it's also communication in a sense that please ask around, but sometimes you are surprised with the amount of data available. So you're right.
And may I also just say something else, because you said also samples. So Jeroen and I are not specifically focusing on samples yet, but there are other groups within Health RI that are also trying to figure out a way of doing better with the samples that are already there. So maybe we can also take a look at that later.
Is it also okay to forward your question or name to that group? Because
yes, sure.
Or maybe you are already in that group. I don't know.
No, not yet, I think. But for us, most of the problems are the clinical data, because the samples that's pretty standardized, but it's to couple it to clinical data. Even in our own hospital, we have different people that had indeed collected data, and it's not complete. And that's really because it was so hectic. And
Can I comment as well? Hello?
Yes, Adriana?
Yes, thank you. No, I agree with Femke. The same thing was for us. And we are working actually with COVID patients not at the hospital, so at home. So it's even a bit more complicated. And we have designed our questionnaires and adapted it as long as new information was known about COVID. So what do you recommend? What do you expect? Do you expect that then we fill data in, for instance, the WHO form to harmonize it, or is there a plan for this? Maybe you will tell us later, but that's of course a question I have now. And then I have another questions about the data stewards from our research offices in our hospitals or institutions. Are you actually in contact with them? Do you have also a group with them? Because we have a bit of confusing messages from them. We thought they will actually make the data plan together with us, but they will, drive the data plan. But we now understand that we have to do it, we, the researchers, and they will sort of advise. So that means it's a lot of burden for us on top of the research and the science, where we hardly get time to do science. We have to do all these administrative things, let's say. So I don't know, maybe it's a perception.
Again, Adriana, let's talk about it after this meeting.
Yeah.
That there are solutions for that.
Who is saying?
Is that okay?
Margreet.
Yeah, Margreet. Yeah. No worry.
Yeah, well, I'm a bit worried because
don't worry.
I'm overloaded. I'm going to get a nervous breakdown if we continue.
Yeah.
Like.
But one point should be clear for all, because otherwise people might ask the same questions. There is a difference between the data management plan and collecting the data. So those are two different processes. In the data management plan, you could refer to the standardized collection. So the standardized collection, as Rita pointed out, is taken care of by a large group, including the UMCs and the SCZs. And the data management plan, as Margreet already pointed out, follows the standard procedures. And of course, you can ask questions, and there is a data stewardship group led by Mijke. So in principle, everything should be in place. So please ask your questions later on, as Margreet indicated.
Yeah, and maybe to add to that, so all the data stewards in this session will receive a mail after this session by me to invite them to join the community and to make sure that we keep each other aligned and have enough time to ask and address your questions. So that's a bit solving Adriana's question also. So as long as you have your data steward on board, well, make sure to have your data steward on board in these sessions as well and the follow-up, and then we'll help the data stewards again.
Okay, let's see. We also still have a question by Charlotte. Charlotte, would you like to highlight your question to us?
No, she said the microphone and camera doesn't work for her.
Okay.
So I think we have to ask her a question for her.
So Charlotte says, we cannot disclose interview reports because people can be traceable. If we anonymize reports, they will not be very useful for other research projects. What do you expect from the interview data in this COVID-19 context? I think it's really about metadata, but I think some of my colleagues will be better state to answer the question, maybe Erik, but Erik will going to explain that in more detail later anyway. So maybe we can wait to Erik's session to answer that question. And if this question is still there, then we will go back to it. Is that okay?
Yeah, she stated it's okay.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, then
We
yeah.
have Inge's question left about taking into account other than only the medical data. So Inge, do you want to point out your question and address it?
Yeah, so, well, I think there will be sufficient attention for it because, well, most of the attention goes to the medical research and most of the standards are based on the medical research, but we're in the socio-economic research. So I just wanted to point out that, well, and to ask the question here, is there sufficient attention for those, well, the other than medical research fields?
Yeah, and Rita, maybe I can take that one.
Yep.
Yeah, this is Erik from the support crew here. And so this is a great question, Inge, because one of the things that we will be doing, focusing on in the next coming months and then as the portal comes up, is to work with the domain experts to define precisely the standards and maybe even like controlled vocabularies and semantic descriptions that are relevant for your domain. So we're really going to try to work very closely to define that in a very precise, even machine actionable way, so that indeed for the standards that may be typical in the social economic domain, you know, that could be different from some of the standards in, say, the molecular biology or virology domain, that you know, those are taken account of. But we're also looking with an eye towards any possible overlaps, either, you know, between these domains or at least in the generic metadata components between them. So certainly in your domain, you will be talking about authors and co-authors and data producers, but those same categories are happening as well in those other domains in molecular biology. So one question, that we will try to frame for the entire COVID program, how is it as a community, as a COVID program community, how is it that we're going to talk about people at a machine actionable level? Can we all agree that maybe ORCID is a perfectly fine identifier system for authors and co-authors and people and institutions? So those are the kinds of discussions that we want to foster over the next coming months, and then build that into our metadata components.
You're looking forward to working on it together.
Yeah, super. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. I think now it's time to go to the next session where Jeroen and Erik will give more details about the project. So also we'll start with Jeroen from AUMC. Jeroen has been working in architecture data infrastructure for many years now from the VUMC, and we've been working together in various projects. And anything that has to do with data infrastructure in the Netherlands will eventually lead to Jeroen. So we're very happy. We are very lucky to have him on board. Jeroen, please take the floor on explaining us how we're going to try to build a portal together.
Okay, I will start sharing my screen. In the meanwhile, while looking for the slides, yeah, seems to be working. I could already address the questions posed earlier about the privacy sensitive part. Whether it's health data or socioeconomic data, everything is privacy sensitive or intellectual property sensitive. So Erik already pointed out that we are dealing with metadata. And the metadata only includes, of course, for example, authors. There's also privacy sensitive data, but we need to be careful about it. But patient data will never be revealed directly or person. So that means that once you have identified your proper set, also in a data portal, there will be, as we call it, a negotiation phase. You write your scientific purpose, you negotiate with the data owner, and then it's decided whether you need privacy, the personal identifier or not, otherwise you cannot link data, or you will get pseudonymized or anonymous data. So the data will never be revealed directly. There's always a step in between for the moment, even with machine readable formats. So I hope that clarifies a little bit or takes away worries about revealing personal information. We don't, to be clear. So it was already pointed out that I work in the health data infrastructure. So already pointed out also by the questions, whatever we do is based on the information we gathered to help patients in the future. And that means that we need to identify the proper data collected in the proper way. And moreover, as already was made clear by several questions, is that a lot of data is being collected in a fragmented way. So we, and also in the chat, if I'm not mistaken, it was stated that we all are in enormous time pressure. So we have to do a lot. So that it means that if we could take away a little bit of fragmentation and help each other, as Erik said, we are a support team. We're here to help each other out instead of only, there is a famous saying, it's nothing to do with my slides. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I guess GoFit means we have to go far. So please, let's do it together.
And Jeroen, if I can interrupt for a moment, if you replace FAIR by FAIR, I think the
Oh, didn't I pronounce it correctly? No, you're right. Okay. So that's having said, brings me to the National COVID portal. And there is a clear, broad knowledge base needed. And that means not only health data, but also socioeconomic data. Think about patients taking their, how do you call it, recovering. That has influence on socioeconomic sides as well. People stay at home, cannot do anything. They feel still tired, and that influences their health as well. So there is probably a need to to work together and get the data as soon as possible to generate a large knowledge base for which, given the discussions also at the broadcast stations, food for thought. In principle, you could get to knowledge in more or less 5 steps. Of course, the first step already being pointed out that we need to be careful. We have to handle with privacy sensitive data, and we need to set up the proper security information, the legal frameworks. So just for your information, also at the national level, we are working on a registry of control, or in Dutch, zeggenschapsregister, which handles all kind of formal consents. We need to communicate about that. The collection of the data according to the FAIR principles has already been addressed. We should, as much as possible, use the same forms. Although we started all running around and doing things to help patients, we are now at the phase that we could standardize both on data collection as well as sample collection, because the National Biobank is being set up as well. Doing this means that governance should be in place as well. And the governance means that, as I explained, if I am interested in data, I need to know who to contact, whether there will be a data access committee or a material access committee. We need to set up the proper agreements in the next phase. Once you identify that you might be working on it, you need data material transfer agreements. And in the end, as a researcher, you would like to be able to find the data. If we make the data fair and in a proper way, that means that your data is findable, and it should at least be accessible. And accessible means that you are able to push a button and brought into contact with the organization, which is the owner of the sample or the data. So that means it can only be facilitated if we have proper clinical data. We have the proper samples, as well as samples. Sometimes, in this sense, we mean biological samples, because an image can be a sample as well. And it holds also for the other domains related to COVID. So it's extremely essential that we streamline the data collection in a coherent manner. This is a rather colorful picture, complicated, while having presenting this presentation now for the 3rd time. In the background, people are already working on a, let's call it Jip and Janneke version of this picture, using the same colors. But I hope you will be able to see my mouse. I'm moving it now. Is it visible? Okay, I see nodding faces. This green box here represents an institute, in this case a hospital. In a hospital, patients are being treated, hopefully cured for their COVID. And during that process, laboratory data, images like CT, which is being used a lot in corona research, as well as care, and the clinical data already discussed. If we use the proper standards, as Erik identified, per domain, in this case, the health domain, certain standards are there. We try to identify them and are going to reuse them. And once this is all in place, you will have local FAIR data inside your institute. So at least you can already reuse it in your own institute. But of course, we know that especially in the first wave, let's say the southern part of the Netherlands have had more patients than Groningen, for example, where only in the last period patients were transferred. But you want to combine them. To do that, if all institutes are able to provide at least FAIR metadata, we can bring it inside a national COVID search portal. And now comes the most important part. Here are we. We are researchers looking for data, or clinicians looking for similar patients. So you would like to be able to search for data and make it findable. If it's findable, you can find it. As soon as you find your proper set, sample, whatever you have, you would like to make a request, either data or a sample. That's being forwarded, and here's the proper governance in place that's being worked on at the same time as we speak. So that means that we need data and material sharing agreements in also templates, so that we don't have to reinvent wheels. We have to go to, let's say, the legal office, rephrase every document. That should be in place. So everything to facilitate our work. And once everything is approved, you will be given either data access or sample access. And of course, this is not only for one hospital, as I stated, it's for many hospitals. And in the ideal world, all data can stay at the local institution. And this portal we are going to build will only visit the data and to collect the metadata here. So that's an additional privacy and security layer we would like to point out. Translating this picture to a different level, and most of the things I told you, we have already stated FAIR, and we all are now going to talk about FAIR data points, which is being explained later on by Erik Schultes. So I'm not going to mow on the grass for him. He will enlighten us. But the idea is that all data stays in the end at the hospital, the institute, wherever you have it, and that the identification is used, done by specific pseudonymization keys. Once this is possible, then either in the end, every institute could have its own local FAIR data point, or even better, a study-specific FAIR data point, or even a central discipline. So a social economic FAIR data point. That could be a combination of data points. It's depending on the governance being set up, how you organize this. And the blue ones are, let's say, data points. And what you do see is there are yellow boxes. We call it a web portal. That's the interface for the human. So machines, what Erik will explain, if all the data is properly made FAIR, and the metadata, the machines can, let's say, communicate with the data environments. But for the human, of course, that's mumbo jumbo, or whatever you call it, not readable. You need an interface to be able to also express your research questions. I would like to combine how many patients have been treated at the ICU, and do I see more males or females at the ICU, for example? How is that related to the obesity, for example? That's the human interface. But the same question can be asked for computers. And moreover, what you do see is if you properly set up this infrastructure, it can be implemented locally in the same way, so that you could even host data at your institute, which not necessarily is exposed to the outside world. Or if you don't, then you just directly link to this. Also on Margreet's slide, if I was not mistaken, Odyssey came by. That's not health data infrastructure, that's social science infrastructure. And that means that if you take the same picture, you're a researcher, and you would like to find data, you go to the portal, you interface with the metadata to stress the fact that you don't interface with the, let's say, underlying data points, like my weight or my length, but only with the variable length search. You get the metadata for the, from the repositories, and it would be nice if not only the health data would be, let's say, FAIR, but also, for example, DANS, which collects a lot of data, but also CBS. So we're already in contact even with the health environment with CBS to see what's possible. If you find your proper set, you would like to have access. That should be facilitated by all those data owners, and that's called here DAC, and it stands for a Data Access Committee. And the same holds for samples, but then it's a Material Access Committee or whatever you call it. Once everything has been arranged, the data can be transferred. But what we now do face is that certain data sets are so big, especially if you want to work with CBS, that you cannot run it at the local infrastructure. And for that, there is a program setup called Odyssey, making use of the national supercomputer where you can do your analysis. So would that not be nice if we can do that together as well? But to get there, given the current situation in the data landscape, we would like to do it step by step. We call it the stepping stone principle. And we already talked a lot about the paper case record forms set up by the WHO. And not everybody has a nice hand phone or a personal data assistant where data can be collected on site. Some do it on paper. But based on this form, also in the Netherlands, we try to harmonize it. Because even if you have a paper form, the paper needs to be translated, interpreted. So for example, a variable name for gender in one hospital is sex, or even worse in Dutch, geslacht. And if you want to collect that data, then you need to bring geslacht to sex or sex to geslacht, whatever you have. Now that's being done by the group headed by Rita and myself. We are close to full mapping. And once this is done, we're going to build a can-do or make-do or houtje-touwtje website by which you are able to see all the standardized data items, only aggregated simple data. It's not live aggregation, but just a kind of simple dashboard to show what's possible. And this is the timeline we expect. Hopefully we will be quicker, but we should also be realistic given the time pressure we're on. And of course, then if it's a stepping stone, you have a next step. And the next step would be, and also depending on your request and wishes, but we envision that you would like to be able on all parameters assessed at that WHO form to do cross-table analysis or simple statistics. And that's done, will be presented in the next phase. And moreover, there will be a button, not the magic red button you press and everything works, but a button to start your request, for which you will be guided to the organization, handling and owning the data, etc. And moreover, once this is fine, we would like to make a, let's say, call it a more future-proof technical decision on what kind of infrastructure we need for the next version. And of course, we would like to use the FAIR data point infrastructure. And what you do now see is that I'm going to deviate from my own color scheme. I use the red one, the blue one, it was dark blue, but you also see certainly green ones. And if you are working with Excel, Excel is green. This means that certain institutes work at a different pace. And one might be able to come up with a FAIR data point in a few months, but some are still collecting the data in Excel, but it is standardized because we agree on a certain data model. Once this is possible, Excels can be uploaded to the national site. And if you have FAIR data points, that can stay locally. So it will be a kind of hybrid environment by which you can collect and synchronize the data. The next step is, of course, that we should realize that this is a multidisciplinary team effort. You need multiple support groups. So you have the support group today at this, let's say, at the table, but you yourself are also a very big support group. It's not only one data steward, you need multiple ones inside your own institute, preferably, because they handle the different types of data. They are experts in their own domain. But once you are able to get, let's say, everything for COVID running, how should I expose, or you expose that data to the outside world? It's not your specialty. You need your IT department or an external organization. So there needs to be communication also between the data stewardship community and your local IT department. Otherwise, that will be a large threshold to take. So this is an example from the LUMC. It's a kind of testing ground. They are guinea pigging for us what is necessary. And if this is, let's say, an organic organization, in the end, we will have happy COVID community, either being as researchers or whatever. The data is findable, it's accessible, it uses open specifications. And more important, and that helps us, is the data doesn't leave the institute. Because the data need to be owned, controlled, and a lot of institutes would like to keep it for the moment at their own site. So that brings me to one of the important things still to do, although we might have some perspective of how we will present the data to you, is that we would like to know what kind of requirements you as a domain or a data steward or a clinician would like to have with the end user. And that will be collected by Tineke and Sophie. I don't know whether Erik will present the schema or Rita at the end with the workshops. But part of those workshops, and M for M, another abbreviation Erik will dwell on, but it stands for metadata for machine workshops. Later on, also Tineke and Sophie, or Erik, Rita and myself, or Margreet, Mijke will help you gather that information. So we will also present you some examples to help you, because you need to understand what we are looking for. And moreover, it might be the case that to prepare those workshops, we are going to send you a kind of template to gather the initial information to get a perspective what we should do at those meetings. And that brings me to, let's say, the take-home messages for you. Already stated, as soon as you start using or reusing clinical data or start collecting new data, then the main question is, do you collect it using the standardized WHO ECRF? Are you going to collect data from the electronic health record inside your institute? Please consult your local office. If that's not known to you, please consult at least Rita, Mijke, or myself. And don't wait till the next month with your questions. And if and we are all successful, this is the ideal world also within the Health RI organization, that if COVID works, then it should be able to work for other type of data as well. Although we do realize that there is a lot of work still to be done, but the same structure can be reused for other data sets as well. So that brings me to the end. And I will stop sharing, and I will ask the audience if there are any specific questions. I didn't see the chat, so I have no chance to see if there were questions during this.
Sorry, I was on mute. I think there's a question from Linda Dekker.
Yeah, hi, I'm Linda from the Erasmus University in Rotterdam. I think I already saw the answer in your pre-last slide, but I was wondering if we're doing a collaboration study with multiple clinical institutions, do we store the metadata per institution or do we do it per study?
That's a very good question. That depends on, let's say, the governance in place or still to be set up. What you do see is that certain studies, like the national very large COVID studies, use a central tool to collect the data. For example, Castor or Redcap or whatever tool is used, or it's used locally in, for example, electronic health record. And what we try to organize is that whatever you do with data collection, if it is brought to the same standardized WHO and ICERIC data model, then it can be collected. So if you have any questions also with the collaboration you are going to set up or already have in place, let's discuss it. What will be the best solution for you? But mostly you do see that, let's say, the principal investigator of the study sets up an environment to work in. And if that's done according to the standards, you're fine.
All right. Thanks.
But I guess at least at project level, if you have to do at least at project level, the other ones might be extra.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, we don't have on the minutes any other questions. Maybe someone else has got some questions that they would like to ask without writing them down. No. So I think I will continue to the next speaker. That's Erik Schultes. Sorry, I tend to say it the Dutch way, but he's American. So Schultes, who's our Go FAIR specialist, who's actually been involved in this FAIR movement from very early on, from the beginning, and is involved in FAIR projects all over the world, including the Vodan activities that he's also going to speak a little bit about. So we're very happy to be able to have him in our support team, as he just called us now. So thank you very much, Erik. Please give us your knowledge, pass us our knowledge.
Super, thank you, Rita, and thank you, Jeroen, for setting things up. So this is, we've done this information session now. This is the third time, and they're really a packed 2 hours. So I'm just warning you that you've got one more presentation here to experience. But I made this note while listening today, and I just want to reassure the data stewards here in particular that myself and my colleagues here on this support team, we are still or former practicing scientists ourselves, and we know that being on the cutting edge of research is already more than a full-time job. I would just like to reassure you and to ask your trust that, you know, we're working really hard behind the scenes to try and make this, this fair data stewardship element as easy and straightforward and valuable to you as possible. I think if we do a good job here, the things we will ask you to do will make a lot of sense to you, will have a lot of value to you, and it should be pretty clear, I think, how to proceed. So even though there's an apparent complexity here in a full 2-hour webinar like this, I think by the time we get the ball rolling in a practical way, things should be, I think, much easier to absorb and make much more intrinsic sense. And I will tell you about this, this framework, this verification framework we call the 3-point framework. This was developed only in the last 6 months due to the urgency of the COVID pandemic. Although the technologies and the methods have been around for a while, we've kind of been able to formulate it into a real verification framework, or a kind of a 3-point plan. And that's what we're going to be asking the data stewards in the COVID program to participate in. Before I tell you about this 3-point plan, I just wanted to preface a little bit on, you know, what is FAIR principles, and what's this idea of metadata? Why is it so important? And so here's a figure item from a paper from 2016.
Erik, you are not sharing your screen.
Oh, yes, very good. Thank you for that reminder, because I'm looking at the screen and it looks really good to me. Okay, yeah. There you go.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So I just want to say, yeah, here's my name. I'm at GoFair. And then this is what I wanted to say is, as far as, you know, engendering your trust, that we try to make this as easy and straightforward for you as possible. And then here's the FAIR principles, as I mentioned, as they were published in this paper 4 years ago now. And if you look, they're sort of these 15 one-liners. They're very computer science oriented or very data science oriented. This idea of the FAIR principles took off like wildfire. It's really been widely cited now. This is just a snapshot I took the other day from Google Scholar. And in fact, you know, it's made such an impact that here we are on this webinar, you know, 48 people now, right? 46 people talking about implementing these principles. So FAIR is, of course, this acronym for data that's findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Certainly, obviously, with the human in mind, with the researcher in mind. But these principles were designed really to get the computer to do these functions more and more on its own. A lot of surveys have shown that data scientists are spending like 80% of their time on sort of routine data munging exercises, like just finding data, making it interoperate with other data. So there's a real need, recognized broadly now, that the computer has to do more of this work for us. And FAIR is really just about automating these FAINR functions. But if for the machine, then certainly much for people. And then I want to highlight, as far as metadata goes, that metadata is all over the FAIR principles. And I think these principles have done a great job to elevate this idea of metadata from, you know, something you might consider to do late on a Friday afternoon before the weekend, but to elevate it then to really a first-class citizen along with the data. And I would even be willing to argue in a provocative way that for FAIR, metadata is even more important than the data itself. And we could talk about that another time if you like, but metadata is really central to what we're doing. And the COVID program is really taking a big step towards emphasizing this in the data stewardship. So what is metadata? It's data about data. And here's a nice example where, you know, you have a simple tabular data set and you annotate these columns, you annotate the variables with names. And those could be certainly human readable free text. It could also be controlled vocabularies, or even, you know, linked data vocabularies that would allow the machine to actually understand what these variables are. Here's just kind of an overview of data versus metadata. And I think it reflects most of our sort of common understanding of that. But I would like to emphasize as well that the distinction between data and metadata is itself somewhat arbitrary. And it really depends on your point of view and how you want to use that information, whether you call it data or metadata. So we don't have to be really, I think, hung up or blocked by, big discussions about what is data, what is metadata. An example of this might be your ORCID profile. You're a researcher, you have a profile of information about you. Certainly, a lot of applications would say, well, that's the metadata. This is a researcher attached to a data set, and these are the affiliations. This is all metadata on that data. On the other hand, if I were to...
Erik, can I just ask you a question? We just had a request to have your slides a little bit bigger.
Yeah, let's do this. Let me see if I can. I'm showing you the slides in presentation mode, or not presentation mode, because it usually gets hung up in Zoom. Can you see that?
It is hung up. Can't see it.
Okay, let's restart the share. So I'm going to stop, and I'll start again.
Sorry if it's just me who has problems reading the slides like this, and please continue in this mode. It's fine.
Get better. Is that helping? I'll continue, but in any case, the slides will be made available.
Thank you.
At another time. Yeah, but this is just to say, right then, if I do an analysis over a large number of researchers by looking at statistical patterns in their ORCIDs, then that ORCID profile, that metadata, would then in that case be for me a real data set. And then just the last thing I wanted to mention that I think is important about framing metadata in the COVID program is that the FAIR principle F3 is asking for something that seems really obvious, but it almost never happens. And it's asking that there is a persistent link, in fact, a machine readable link between your metadata and your actual data set. And for very elaborate metadata, which cannot always be embedded in a data file itself, oftentimes these two things get disconnected. And it's the main job of this thing called the FAIR data point to make this link. And I just want to highlight that here. We'll come back to it in a moment. Everything I'm about to tell you is available to you there's references to these things available to you from the agenda. And if I go to the chat, I'll just go ahead and put the link directly into the chat. But you have access to some references here. So I'll talk about the FAIR data point and some metadata for machine workshop elements, and you can see more at these links. Okay, so let me just give you, in a few minutes, kind of the overview of this 3-point FAIRification process that's the basis of what we're doing in the COVID program. And I think it's always nice to start from a very familiar point of view. You're a researcher, you apply for funding, maybe to ZonMw, you get, if you're lucky, an award, and you perform your research. And I think for most researchers right now, the end goal is to get this research article, a publication out of it. Of course, data is generated in the process. And for example, some of this data may in fact be these electronic case report forms. And that data could be stored somewhere appropriate. And typically these research articles will try to link to these data sets, but when the data are not fair, and given that research articles are always, or oftentimes themselves, not very good at doing this linking, the data ends up over time getting lost. And even over a few years later, it can be often impossible to really reproduce the study because the data just go missing, or the data, even if they're there, there's too much manual labor involved in the access and interoperation and reuse to make it practical to work with. So in the COVID program, and this is quite innovative, it's really a huge leap forward in many ways, but in the COVID program, there's a requirement to make your data fair. And that means following these FAIR principles. And this is an implementation pathway that we've worked out in Go FAIR. As I say, the elements here have been in the works for years, but the COVID program really kind of focused it into this 3-point thing. And I hope, with 3 elements here, it takes some of the complexity out of this for you. It's, if you can do these 3 things, you'll be perfectly fair. And we're here to assist you in these 3 steps. I'll mention a little bit about this FAIR implementation profile. Inga's question about the standards that are relevant for her community. That's what the FAIR implementation profile is. It's a statement about the standards that you're committed to using. In the context of COVID, we have an implementation network in Go FAIR called the Virus Outbreak Data Network, or VODAN. And VODAN has already created a FAIR implementation profile for their COVID research. I suspect we borrow heavily from the VODAN FAIR implementation profile, but probably extend it with the work that we do in this program. The VODAN FAIR implementation profile asks for data to be put on a FAIR data point. So we'll replace this generic repository, whether it's internal or external. We'll replace it with this idea of a FAIR data point, and I'll talk about that later. But that FAIR data point gets configured according to machine actionable metadata that's created by you, by the domain experts and the data stewards, to reflect your research as well as it can. And we're going to break the 50 or 60 research projects in the COVID program into these 5 cluster groups and create metadata specific for these cluster groups, if not actually at the level of your research project. And we will share those standards as much as possible to make our data as interoperable as possible. If that's accomplished, it'll be much easier to connect your data to your research articles, to connect to the Leiden University FAIR data point, which Jeroen already mentioned. It'll be possible to connect to an emerging network of FAIR data points throughout Africa, which is part of another funded program from early March in Go FAIR. And then there's also the emerging FAIR data points that we expect in the context of the COVID program. And I'm sorry, I'm gonna kill my Skype for you so you don't have to hear it. Okay. So that's the idea. That's where this can go. Another view of this is, again, borrowing the picture from Jeroen. If the COVID national portal that we would like to create, one version of this, kind of a straightforward application of the FAIR data points, is basically to interlink these FAIR data points. And we can do this in a hierarchical way. We can bundle data elements and FAIR data points as we like to create essentially a directory of FAIR data points that would allow researchers to do some pretty sophisticated search and access of data sets by virtue of them being on a FAIR data point. You can learn more about the whole 3-point FAIRification thing. Just to let you know, there's a working group that meets every other Friday that's developing this 3-point FAIRification process. And the first order of business is to actually create documentation for this. And your efforts in the next few months are very much going to contribute in one way or another to these documentation efforts. And if you would really like to be a participant on these working groups, that's entirely possible. And I suspect some of you who are particularly interested would like to join. Okay, so the last thing I'd like to say in just a few minutes here would be just to give you an overview of these 3 elements of the FAIRification framework. And it's nice to start with the FAIR implementation profile. In the way we've built it, the FIP is itself a piece of FAIR data. It's machine actionable. So it's a list of all the resources that you're using to actually implement each of those 15 FAIR principles. And it includes your domain relevant community standards, very importantly. So the FAIR data point can handle very generic operations, but we need to know what vocabularies and data standards are you using in your domain? As I mentioned, Vodon has their FIP already. You can read what it is. There's a human readable version. There's also a machine actionable version. And using these links, you can actually check that out. What I suspect will happen in the COVID program is that we will extend the Vodon FIP with respect to the data standards and other elements relevant to the research projects in the COVID program. So I'm using the blue logo color of ZonMw here to say, yeah, we might end up at the end with a COVID program fair implementation profile, meaning that all of us in the program will have come to an agreement on the standards that we will use to talk about our data. And I know there's been some questions already about the DMP. The fair implementation profile is actually, when it's completed, becomes a very nice resource to consult when constructing your data stewardship plan. It tells you all the standards and technologies you're using to implement FAIR. So for at least these FAIR components of your DMP, the COVID program FIP will be a very valuable asset for you. Okay, so that's the FIP. What about this metadata for machines workshop? Starting again with this idea that metadata is very important to FAIR, but also realizing that for most of us, we're not experts in metadata, and almost none of us are experts in machine actionable metadata. So we designed a set of workshops, or we designed a workshop format called Metadata for Machines that pairs a domain expert, a data producer, with a FAIR metadata expert in order to create some metadata that's useful for the FAIRification of their work. And we've run now, over the last couple of years, 6 metadata for machine workshops, including an ongoing series of workshops for the Vodon Africa project. And what we've worked out is, again, a kind of a simplified system by which we can already begin to build solutions, metadata solutions, for those who wish to make their data FAIR. And a metadata for machine workshop is a way of kind of conveying these solutions and getting communities to agree on the reuse of these. And I'm showing here there's different ways of parsing the FAIR principles and identifying different elements that are relevant for metadata. And that's what we can help us to structure these metadata for machine workshops. And the format looks like this. You have a domain expert, a metadata expert, and the output would be metadata schema that are themselves FAIR, so they are also findable by the machine, accessible, reusable. They're domain specific because they were created by the domain expert, and they're reusable. And we encourage as much as possible, the reuse of these metadata schema. Number one, because a lot of time and energy went into creating them, and we don't want to reinvent that wheel needlessly. But number two, if those schema can be reused, they could very much accelerate the convergence onto standards and technologies that would lead to more interoperability and reuse. So the metadata for machine workshop is really just an environment in which to kind of intelligently pick and choose and create the metadata that's relevant for you, and to try and get the most fairness out of it as possible. You can think of the metadata expert as a data steward, and you might even think of yourselves, begin to think of, for the data stewards on the call, if you yourself would like to become someone who might lead these metadata for machine workshops. So the domain expert, in this case, will be the PIs, project leads, and the data stewards on these 50 or 60 research projects in the COVID program. And we will run a series of metadata for machine workshops along the lines of these cluster groups I mentioned earlier. We have reserved dates for these workshops already, and you can see there's more dates than there are topical areas here, and that's okay. We'll have a little buffer capacity to manage people's availability and other logistical constraints. So the question to the project leads, where does your project belong in these 5 cluster groups? And we will ask each of the projects to put themselves into the most appropriate cluster group, and we'll try to balance that out as much as possible, and then find appropriate dates where we'll then actually have a day-long metadata for machine workshop where we will try to finalize some metadata components for the COVID program. Who are the metadata experts in this? Well, like I already kind of alluded to, they will be those of us on the support team here at ZonMw and GoFair and HealthRI. There will be external people as well that we'll bring in to help. But what we really, the real innovative thing we're going to try and do here is to run a training in October 7 and 8, but throughout October, we can be available for consulting and additional work. But we will try to train as many of you as we can who have an aspiration to become these FAIR metadata experts. And you will then take part in and help to conduct these metadata for machine workshops in these cluster areas. So another question for the data stewards out there, for those of you appropriately placed here, are you ready to become a FAIR metadata expert? And this is a conversation that will continue after this information session. And by the way, myself and my colleagues are available on Mondays, every Monday from 3 to 4, to begin a dialogue already and to start answering your questions on these things. And then lastly, those metadata elements that you create will decorate your FAIR data point and make them domain specific and relevant to your system. So lastly, just a couple minutes here, the FAIR data point itself is a server application. It's basically a machine actionable metadata platform, publication platform. It's where the metadata elements are themselves linked open data. They're stored in a triple store. They're available through Sparkle queries, and they are machine readable, understandable. And the FAIR data point itself, it's an application you can download and install as a server application. There's some very simple core metadata elements that are built in. And we follow this DCAT vocabulary, if you're familiar with that, which is to say there's 4 layers here of metadata. At the top layer, it's the FAIR data point itself. Then there's data catalogs. And within a data catalog, there could be one or many data sets. And within those data sets, there's a distribution, which means a description of the media type or the file size, file format, et cetera, for the data. And within this distribution layer, there are links to the data itself. And those data could be located anywhere. They could be located on that same server. They could be located in a third-party database. They could be located in a private hospital database. And all the access controls are set by the user so that the data are linkable, they're accessible under well-defined conditions. And those conditions could be open and free, or they could be behind a heavy authorization, authentication procedure as you see fit. There was a question earlier about interviews and interview data and the privacy sensitivity issues around that. So the audio files, the transcripts, the commentaries, annotations, all of that could be on a database somewhere, on a storage system somewhere, but are available via FAIR data point, I should say, under these well-defined conditions. And just a reminder, the FAIR data point is where this F3 principle happens. It's where this metadata is permanently linked to the data it describes. Here's what the FAIR data point looks like in reality. And I'm borrowing this FAIR data point from my colleagues at the Kampala International University in Uganda. And this is a human readable server or a web client that exposes this machine actionable metadata below the hood. So there's a title, there's a description. On the right side, there's all kinds of metadata like the language, the version, a link to the institution, etc. But then here's a set of catalogs. There's the FAIR data. So there's 2 catalogs here, including case report forms. But if I look at the migrant media reports, I go to that data set, then I get a description again about that data set. And the data set itself has a distribution. If I click on this distribution, then I will find out that this is a Google document. And if I go deeper, I can find out actually where I can access this data set, this Google document, and I can get to it. And this Google document is itself not particularly fair. It's just a bunch of free text. It's recording news stories on COVID-related migration patterns in Tunisia. But this Google document is rendered much more fair by virtue of all the machine actionable metadata on top of it. And lastly, then, the metadata for machine workshop will create elements that can answer the FAIR data point metadata descriptions here and extend them as you need it. So, for example, this category 7 is about licensing information, and licensing is built into the FAIR data point itself. And so there will be a moment where we decide what is the most appropriate license for your research project, or for within the COVID program, how do we reference that? We can also talk about more elaborate metadata for findability or for provenance metadata, like this number 8 here. And this is where in the training session we run October 7 and 8, we will learn how to build CDAR templates, which are ways of building machine actionable metadata schema in a pretty facile way. And so we may even build metadata templates that can extend the FAIR data point. And then lastly, I just want to say, COVID program PIs have budget at their discretion and have a decision at their discretion how to set up a FAIR data point or how to get their data on a FAIR data point. And as Jeroen mentioned, the FAIR data point could be in the lab, it could be at the department level, it could be a university-wide FAIR data point. Those are decisions left to the users. And there's also a variety of different implementations of the FAIR data point that are available. There are private companies that can set this up for you for a fee. There are free and open source versions available at DTL Go FAIR or at SurfSara. So if you're comfortable in setting up these server applications yourself, you're free to do so. But if you're not, then there's other solutions, and those solutions, you can use budget to do that. And the final thing I want to say is, those of you in the COVID program should not think of yourself as guinea pigs on all this FAIRification. We're asking a lot of you, that's for sure. And this is very much cutting edge development, but we'd rather think of you as co-developers. And what comes out of this COVID program is intended from the beginning to be tooling and methods that will serve ZonMw in a broad range of research topics in the future. So this could become a way of life for data stewards and for researchers. And what we are looking for from you is help in figuring out how it is that we can refine this whole thing and make it much more production level, production quality. And that's where we'll be asking you to be helping us to build these things. So that's all I will say. I will release the screen now to Rita. And I think we have a practical session here, just a few minutes, where we will ask you to actually sign up for your metadata for machine workshop. And Rita can lead us through that.
You're muted, Rita.
Thank you, Mijke. Before we go to that, maybe there are some specific questions for Erik. I don't know if I haven't read the document. We've had Linda, yes. Adriana, I hope that first question of yours about what is a domain expert has been answered. If not, please let us know. And the last question of yours, what if our project falls in several clusters? I think I will quickly approach that in the next session. next bit. But if there's no other, no other questions for Erik, or is it so overwhelming that I think, how does it work with unstructured data? This is, I think, Charlotte again. Yes. How does it work with unstructured data? I think that's a question for Erik as well.
Yep. So very good question. And I think you can refer to the slide where I showed the FAIR data point connecting to interviews. So in where I said that the metadata are for FAIR anyways, you can consider them to be more important than the data itself. And what I mean by that is, even if your data is not particularly machine actionable, so maybe it's unstructured, maybe it's free text, maybe it's image files, and it's not even clear what it would mean for a computer to, for that kind of data to be machine actionable. The unstructured data is still linkable via the FAIR data point, and the metadata describing that unstructured data can and should still be machine actionable. So we get this question oftentimes, even in from the humanities, how can my 17th century oil paintings be made fair? And the answer is, well, the metadata describing those paintings certainly can be fair. And we're hoping we're developing the tooling and the methods to make that easier.
Okay, Charlotte, good that it's you. This was a good answer for you. Someone wrote that's a lot of information to digest. No name, but I imagine that's some feeling that many of you might have at the moment. So, but I do hope that we can help you go through the steps forward together. I will explain the next set of workshops again in a minute. Maria is asking about how to enroll on the workshops. Yes, I will mention them again. And if there are no other questions, then I'll share my screen again. So I'll go back to the slide that I showed to you in the beginning. If it goes. So I explained to you about what we are doing today. And now my colleagues have explained to you about the metadata for machine workshops in October, and the preparations and the metadata for machine workshops in November, and a weekly Q&A. And I'm going to just summarize each of them for you. And then after that, we can go into the enrollment in these ones. So as Erik said, the workshops in October 7 and 8, workshop, it says it's divided in 2 days, but it's one workshop in reality. It's for data stewards, and basically to train you guys in the format of the M4M workshops, together with a specialist from the US. That's why the times are are a little bit stretched for us Europeans, I think, but it's really a one-off situation that we have someone that lives in a different time zone to us that is available for us to learn about this metadata for machine workshops, and hopefully some of you will really become also the specialists on this, so that we can start having this network of people who can do this in the Netherlands for sure. We will via email and the data stewardship interest group, we will let you know how to enroll for this. So the form is not there yet, but we will let you know how to enroll for that. And then we have the real workshops, which are the workshops for metadata for machine workshops, but also where we'll have a bit of a breakout session to gather requirements for the find and request portal. We have created those 5 clusters. We also get the question that maybe my project doesn't fit into that cluster, or that my project fits in more than one cluster, we would like you to try to, if it fits in various, please let us know which ones they are. We will try to fit you then in the best one. And if we can't, we will contact you, obviously, to see, okay, which is the possibility. And for those who feel they don't fit into the cluster, please also say it, let us know, and I'll let you know in a minute as well how you can do it. And from those 8 moments, we're going to try to get 5 days out of it, and try to juggle all of your availabilities at the same time. But I can't promise we'll be able to make everyone happy. And these workshops will be between 12 and 5 with a bit of a window to go into 6 o'clock. Again, we'll try not to do that as much as possible. And for those, well, for all of us who have still questions or want some support on how to go forward, we have decided to start this weekly free walk-in Q&A sessions for the community, where the team will be available to answer any kind of questions you may have. Please take advantage of our availability, and if we can't answer your questions, we'll definitely send the question to whoever can help you. So this is the summary. Again, we'll send you the slides later on. But now for really short-term actions, we would really like you to go to the agenda, to the top of the agenda. There's a link to a file called clusters in Google, where we'd like you, the PI, and you, the data steward, to fill in your cluster preference. And that's in one of the sheets. And on the other sheet, let us know for which of the days that we have available, the 8 days for which you are available. And again, I think Margreet would like me to stress that we will really need your presence there. So please fill in your availability. So preference for cluster, and there add please your final project number as given to you by ZonMw. And you can do this now. We will have the Google document open for a few days, but we don't want to have it open for very long. And then we're going to try to do the puzzle of combining all of your cluster selections with your availabilities, and hopefully have a proposal that is good for as many people as possible. And action for the data stewards who want to be involved in these 7 and 8 workshop. We will give you more information on how to apply for it soon. I can also go to this document now, see if
and Rita, I put the link to the Google sign up document in the chat. So it's one way for people to access it, or through your agenda, through the Google agenda.
Okay, I couldn't. Excuse me, where did you put it? In the chat. I can't see the chat at the moment, maybe because I'm presenting. I can't see it. So you see there's the clusters, and on your right, you have the cluster names for your information as well. And on this other sheet, you have your the dates that we have proposed, and please add your information there. And you put in the agenda. I will stop sharing now. Wait
the link you show is the same as in the chat. So
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yep. So I think we can continue doing that. I'll stop sharing. I don't think we need to see people filling in the forms as we speak. I don't know if Erik, you would like to say anything else about the workshops in the meanwhile, and or if there are any other questions. Let me go back myself to the agenda.
There is one question in the chat now. Is the document still available on Monday? I have to look up some things and ask my colleagues. Yeah. So we have a weekend in between. So yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rita, I think the only thing I would add is what I said at the beginning to that I think we in the support group here understand that this is going to be really overwhelming and seems very complicated and very new at the moment, but our mission is really to try and make it, you know, as doable as possible. And again, it's not only for this COVID program, but it's thinking ahead to, you know, how do we begin to replicate this in other research programs as well going forward. So yeah, it's complicated. It's early days. That's the downside. The upside is that, again, for those of you who are really kind of interested in the innovative elements of this, please consider yourselves co-developers. And, you know, there's lots of interesting high impact work to be done, lots of low-hanging fruit. And, you know, I think there's research articles to write if that's of interest to you. But certainly the things that are created over the next, you know, 12 to 18 months, I think a lot of those things will have a lasting impact for a long time to come.
Okay, we have a question by Adriana. We expect each project to participate in one meeting, one workshop meeting in November. So we'll do our best. We'll try to put you in the workshop that best fits your data. So we don't want you to be participating in 5 different workshops for sure. If we have problems in finding which is the best for you, we will contact you.
The other way around is also true. So if you're interested in multiple clusters, because your project covers a lot of different areas, you're free to join multiple sessions. So don't withhold yourself to only one. But of course, the time is, as already stressed at the start, busy for all of us. So please pick your appropriate moments. Yeah.
What is the essential data that you're producing, and where you feel like yourself is know more about? So that's, I think, where you should focus yourself if you have to.
And I'll mention too, you know, we will try to do after the training on October 7 and 8, we will try to keep engaged with the data stewards and the research projects. I would like very much to see that a lot of the work that we would think of as happening in the metadata for machine workshop, a lot of those decisions could be made even before we have those workshops themselves. And if that goes well, then those workshops will be much more kind of reviewing decisions that were already kind of considered. And you know, the workshops will be essentially a kind of declaration that, hey, these are the metadata elements that we want to use in our project going forward. So it's, there's an opportunity here to use kind of like our time before the workshops to actually make some of these decisions as well, taking the pressure off a little bit on those workshop days.
Okay, Adriana, does that help a bit?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I was just asking Margreet if we are, yeah, she's going to have a meeting with me and Maria. We are from the same institute at the end of this meeting, or shall we plan another?
Right at the end of this meeting will not suit, but just send me an email and I will get in touch with you and we will make an appointment. Yeah?
Fine, that's better. Okay, thank you very much.
So thanks all. I need to drop as well because I have a European meeting on COVID in a minute.
see you later. Jeroen, have a nice weekend.
Yep.
Mijke, are there any wrap-ups you would like to do?
Well, I was just, there was one question still left. If you have a colleague who already joined another session, whether he or she already filled in the spreadsheet, and of course you don't know them, please also complete it, fill it in, and we'll try to match the project and the people all on the same date. So better twice than none, or discuss with them and complete it Monday. So the only thing I wanted for as a wrap up refer to is again that I'll send out an email directly after this meeting to all of the data stewards, and to invite you to continue any of the questions you have in the community later on. And we'll, as Erik and Rita already referred to, so we have each Monday those question and answer sessions for you to walk into.
Okay. Margreet, Erik, any last minute message you would like to pass on to the group?
No, just stay calm. We're going to get this together.
Yes, well, I only want to add to that. I'm looking forward to working together with you. And once again, it's co-development, and we are available to help and make a good work of it, good results.
Okay, then I think we're very well on time today. Thank you all very much for your attention, and yeah, looking forward to seeing you in the next few weeks, and definitely on Mondays, please abuse us, abuse our availability. We're there for that, and thank you all for doing this with us and building this airplane together.
Rita, one last question. The Google agenda from today is available all the time for us to access?
No, we will close it at a certain moment, because yeah, there's no point in having this link available, but we'll have the presentations and the summary of the documents available to you via another format.
Okay, thank you.
And we will try, oh, I almost forgot, please add your feedback or add any other pressing questions as well to the end of the document for us to improve in the, well, we don't have any other one of these introductory sessions, but we would like to learn what went well and what didn't. And any other questions we can already start working on and maybe already add to the summary documents. We'll try to answer anything that hasn't been answered yet for that purpose. Okay, I think everyone is leaving, so thank you, and everyone have a nice weekend already.